If I had to visit one place in the U.S., it would definitely be Thunderbird Falls. It's as if this waterfall were created by God to ward off the world's evil. That's how beautiful it is. The place where this waterfall is located is called Chugiak. It's about 20 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska. If you've never been there, let me describe the route. The trail to the waterfall is about a mile-round trip, and there before you lies nature's unique beauty. The water, winding its way through the birch trees, cascades 200 feet down into the canyon. People visit this natural wonder with their families, bring their pets along, and enjoy the beauty. However, on June 2, 2019, a girl named Cynthia Hoffman was brought here with harmful motives. Cynthia's father used to refer to her as Cece to highlight her grace. Cynthia hadn't yet experienced certain things in life, and her father called her that to emphasize her innocence. Each of us goes through certain experiences in life. As a result of these experiences, our trust in people is sometimes shattered, and we grow. However, this did not happen to Cynthia. She had developmental disabilities and was able to trust people she shouldn't have. On the night of June 2nd, she did not return home. 2 days later, her form was found on the banks of the cold waters of the Eklutna River. The people who were responsible for this were 18-year-old Denali Bremer and 16-year-old Caden McIntosh. However, they were not from Alaska. To understand this point, we need to go back to the very beginning of the story in Indiana. Before we continue, you up? Good. Forget the noise outside for a second. Leave the cars, the sirens, and the stress at the door. Tonight, these stories will unfold slowly and respectfully, accompanied by gentle rain and subtle atmospheric visuals to create a calm space. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is there. And hit subscribe so we can stick together in the dark. We tell these dark stories not for entertainment or spectacle, and without any dramatization. We share them as a poignant reminder of the real people and real lives that were lost, and perhaps to help us recognize the warning signs that could prevent similar tragedies. For the best experience, lower your volume just a bit, enough to let the rain gently carry you off to sleep. Lights off? Okay, good. Take a breath, a real one. Let's go back, way back. It all starts with a man named Darren Schulmiller. He was 21 years old and lived in the town of New Salisbury, Indiana. He was a man with no particular skills who enjoyed deceiving people. He created an account online and called himself Tyler. He began telling lies to Denali Bremer. He claimed to be from Kansas, and for a whole year tried to convince Bremer that he was a wealthy millionaire by showing her fake photos. The Tyler character Darren Schulmiller created seemed very generous and well-meaning. He asked about Bremer's life in Alaska and how his days were going. Then the non-existent Tyler character made Bremer an offer, a terrible one. He said he would pay exactly $9 million if Bremer caused someone's passing, recorded the incident, and sent the footage to him. Yes, you heard that right, $9 million. At 18 years old, Bremer made the biggest mistake of his life by accepting this. Yes, lured by the promise of money from someone whose very existence he couldn't even be sure of, he was about to target another human being. The worst part of this is that after accepting this false offer, Bremer didn't choose someone he disliked or found unpleasant. He chose the most innocent one. Cynthia Hoffman was 19 years old, and her friends and family knew her as Cece. Cynthia's father, Timothy, was aware of his daughter's developmental issues and feared that this condition would negatively impact her life. This situation also made it difficult for her to form relationships with others. She trusted people too much because she hadn't experienced the heartbreak I mentioned earlier. To her, no one was bad. Denali Bremer began to feign a friendship with Cynthia in order to carry out her harmful plan. Unfortunately, Cynthia had no idea about any of these plans. She had also involved 16-year-old Caden McIntosh and 20-year-old Caleb Leyland, who would drive the car in her scheme. These three people, along with Cynthia, went to Thunderbird Falls on Sunday, June 2nd. Cynthia had no idea that day would be her final outing, and there was no reason for her to suspect it. She had gone for a hike with her friends. She probably thought it was just a hike. The Thunderbird Falls Trail is easy. It's about a mile round trip. The path winds through birch and spruce trees and opens up to a 200-foot waterfall, plunging into a steep canyon. Most people stay on the trail. On June 2, 2019, this group did not. They went off trail at some point. Cece Hoffman was restricted with tape. Her hands were immobilized. She was placed on the ground near the banks of the Eklutna River. What happened in those final minutes has been described in court documents in terms that Judge Andrew Peterson said were among the most difficult things he had ever been required to watch in his position. There is a video. Bremer filmed it. That was the point. Schomiller needed proof. Caden McIntosh caused a single fatal impact to Cynthia Hoffman's head area. They put her form in the Eklutna River and left. Bremer sent the photos and videos to Schomiller. In Indiana, 2 days later, on June 4, 2019, Cynthia Hoffman's form was found on the riverbank. She had a fatal impact to the back of her head area. Her hands had been restricted with tape. Anchorage Police Department Major Investigations Unit opened an investigation, and Detective Brendan Lee began working the scene. The case did not take long to break. Bremer had sent Schomiller documentation of foul play. Schomiller had received it in Indiana. The FBI field offices in both Alaska and Indiana were brought in. Investigators began tracing the digital trail between Anchorage and New Salisbury, and what they found was not subtle. Schomiller and Bremer had been in consistent contact. The $9 million offer existed in their messages. The photos and videos existed. The connection between Schomiller and Bremer, and between Bremer and the group that went to Thunderbird Falls on June 2nd, was all there. When Bremer was brought in for questioning, she did not hold much back. She told investigators about Tyler, about the offer, about the $9 million, about what happened on that trail and who was there. And then investigators told her something she apparently had not verified before agreeing to commit foul play. Darren Schomiller did not have $9 million. He was not a millionaire from Kansas. He was a 21-year-old man in Indiana with no money, a fabricated identity, and a desire to obtain footage of a real incident of foul play and photographs of a real lifeless form. That was what he wanted. That was the whole transaction. Bremer had caused the passing of her best friend for a number that existed only in a text message from a man she had never met in person. Showmiller was extradited to Alaska to face charges. It emerged during the investigation that the arrangement between him and Bremer had extended beyond the foul play. Showmiller had also been involved in other crimes. Federal charges were added. The FBI offices in Alaska and Indiana and the Indiana State Police all had threads to pull, and they pulled them. 4 people were now facing prosecution for what happened at Thunderbird Falls, and Cynthia Hoffman's father, Timothy, was left trying to understand how his daughter had gone on a hike with people she considered friends and come home in a recovery bag 2 days later, pulled from a river. He said the only thing he knew for certain was that Cece had trusted these people. She just wanted friends, he said. That was all she wanted. Darren Showmiller, who had planned everything, was sent from Indiana to Alaska to stand trial and was brought before a court in Anchorage. Showmiller was arrested by the court a few days after the form was found. Showmiller's accomplices, Caden McIntosh and Caleb Leyland, also appeared before the judge following this hearing and were arrested as well. 3 defendants and an innocent 19-year-old girl. There was also a video recording that prosecutors were not familiar with, one depicting the moment the incident took place. Bremer had sent these images to Showmiller after the incident occurred. However, the legal process would continue. With the exception of one of the responsible parties, namely Showmiller, Bremer and Leyland had pleaded guilty to first-degree foul play. McIntosh's attorney, however, was delaying the process. Yet 4 years after 2019, in May 2024, McIntosh also pleaded guilty to second-degree foul play. Every sentencing hearing, in one form or another, circled back to the same question. How could this have happened? How could a 19-year-old girl end up restricted on the ground on a waterfall trail 20 miles outside Anchorage simply because a man in Indiana wanted to watch someone pass away? Judge Andrew Peterson presided over all 4 sentencing hearings. By the time McIntosh appeared before him in 2025, he had already watched the video showing Judge Cynthia Hoffman's final moments countless times. At Bremer's sentencing hearing, he described this video as one of the most difficult pieces of evidence he had ever been forced to watch. He said the same thing at Leyland's sentencing hearing as well. The video existed because Showmiller required proof. The proof was the point. He had not paid $9 million. He had not paid anything. What he received in exchange for a promise he never intended to keep was footage of a real incident of foul play and photographs of a real lifeless form, and he received it from a person he had never met in a state he had apparently never visited. Investigators and prosecutors spent considerable time trying to understand what Showmiller actually was. Both Showmiller and Bremer eventually pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy charges in a separate case. Both received 30-year federal sentences to run alongside their state sentences. At his sentencing, Showmiller said very little that helped anyone understand him. Bremer was different. She talked. She gave investigators everything they needed almost immediately after being brought in for questioning. She explained the relationship with Tyler, the offer, the decision. She named McIntosh and Leyland. She described what happened on the trail in detail that left no ambiguity about the sequence of events. What she did not do at any point in the proceedings was offer an explanation that satisfied anyone in that courtroom, including the judge. Judge Peterson, at her sentencing, noted that Bremer had shown no remorse after the foul play, and had, in fact, continued engaging in criminal conduct at Schillmiller's direction. He acknowledged she was a youthful offender. He said youth matters and that he had considered it carefully. He then said that this was not a youthful indiscretion. Bremer clearly knew what she was doing. She had planned it, recruited people for it, lured her friend to a specific location, filmed it. He sentenced her to 99 years with none suspended. Schillmiller received the same, 99 years. Judge Peterson, at that hearing, called the foul play tragic and senseless. He said Schillmiller had manipulated a young woman into committing foul play for money that was never real, and had done so from a distance of several thousand miles without ever putting himself in physical proximity to any of it. Leyland received 30 years. He had provided the car and participated in the decision that Cynthia would pass away. He was going to receive money for his role. The court considered that he had not been the one to cause the fatal impact and had cooperated with prosecutors. McIntosh received 70 years. He was 16 at the time of the foul play. He was the one who caused the fatal impact to Cynthia Hoffman's head area. Judge Peterson noted that McIntosh had shown no real remorse and had never fully admitted the extent of his conduct. He said it was not an impulsive act. It was planned and premeditated, and McIntosh had known exactly what was going to happen when they walked off that trail. The Anchorage District Attorney, Patrick McKay, spoke at Bremer's sentencing about something that had come up in court documents and victim impact statements, and that kept returning in coverage of the case. Cynthia Hoffman had considered Denali Bremer her best friend, not an acquaintance, not someone she had met recently. Her best friend. She had developmental disabilities that made it harder to navigate the social world that most people move through without thinking about it. She was not always able to read people accurately. She could not always detect when someone's intentions did not match their words, and the person she trusted most in her immediate social circle had spent months building that trust specifically to use it. Timothy Hoffman said at one of the hearings that his daughter just wanted friends. That was the thing she had wanted. That was what she thought she had found. The Anchorage Police Department Detective Brendan Lee, who had worked the case from the beginning, said after the final sentencing that the investigation had been unlike anything he had encountered, not because it was technically complicated. The digital trail between Alaska and Indiana was not difficult to follow once they knew where to look. It was unlike anything else because of what it revealed about what one person was willing to do to another for a number in a text message, a number that was never real. Schillmiller had $9 million the same way Tyler from Kansas was a millionaire. It was a thing he typed, and Cynthia Hoffman passed away for it. The sentencings were spread across 5 years. Schomiller first, January 2024, then Bremer in February, Leyland in August, McIntosh last in November 2025. Judge Peterson sat through all 4 hearings and watched the same video multiple times and said the same thing in different words each time, that what happened at Thunderbird Falls on June 2, 2019, was among the most serious cases he had encountered in his position. That the planning and the coldness of it, and the fact that the victim had trusted the people who caused her passing, made it worse, not better. The sentences reflected that. Schomiller 99 years, Bremer 99 years, McIntosh 70 years, Leyland 30 years. Combined, that is nearly 3 centuries of prison time for the foul play involving a 19-year-old girl who went on a hike and never came home. But the numbers do not really capture what happened in that courtroom across those 5 years. What captured it was Timothy Hoffman. Cynthia Hoffman's father appeared at hearings and gave statements, and watched the people who caused his daughter's passing receive their sentences one by one. He said he wanted peace, not for the defendants, for himself and for Cece. He said his job was to make sure that everyone involved did time for what they had done, and he stayed with that through every hearing, every plea, every sentencing across 5 years. In June 2024, the 5-year anniversary of Cynthia Hoffman's passing was marked with a memorial motorcycle ride in her honor. Timothy Hoffman was there. During the ride, he lost control of his motorcycle. He was 58 years old. He passed away at the scene. The family had already lost Cece. Now they lost Timothy, too, and the people responsible for the first loss were sitting in cells in Alaska, while the second loss happened on a road somewhere outside Anchorage on a day meant to remember her. There's no version of this story that ends cleanly. Darren Schomiller is serving 99 years in Alaska state custody, plus 30 years federal. He orchestrated the foul play against a person he had never met from a couch in Indiana, and received everything he asked for except consequences until the FBI started pulling the digital thread. He never paid $9 million. He never paid anything. The transaction cost him nothing until it cost him everything. Denali Bremer is 24 years old and will not be eligible for any form of release until she is well past 100. The judge acknowledged her youth at sentencing and then set it aside because youth does not explain choosing your best friend as the target. Bremer knew Cece, knew how she moved through the world, knew that Cece trusted her without reservation, and she used all of that. Caden McIntosh was 16 when he caused the fatal impact, and is now 22 and serving 70 years. The judge said he showed no real remorse and had never fully admitted what he did, that at 16 years old he had participated in a planned, premeditated act of foul play for money that turned out not to exist, and had not spent the years since demonstrating that he understood the weight of it. Caleb Leyland provided a car and a vote. He got 30 years. It was all there in the messages, the offer, the acceptance, the coordination, the delivery of the photos and videos after the fact. Schomiller had asked for proof, and Bremer had sent it, and that proof became the spine of the prosecution. The FBI offices in Alaska and Indiana and the Indiana State Police all worked the case across state lines, and the federal charges ran parallel to the state charges. It was the kind of investigation that required coordination across multiple agencies and jurisdictions, and it worked. Every person involved was identified, arrested, charged, and convicted, but none of that brings Cece Hoffman back. Her father said it plainly at one of the hearings. The only thing he knew was that his daughter had trusted these people. She just wanted friends. That was what she was looking for. That was what she thought she had found when she said yes to a hike at Thunderbird Falls on a Sunday in June. The trail is still there. Thunderbird Falls still drops 200 feet into the canyon below. People still bring their kids and their dogs and their cameras. The birch trees look the same, and somewhere in that canyon, on the banks of the Eklutna River, Cynthia Hoffman spent the last minutes of her life restricted on the ground while someone she trusted filmed it for a man in Indiana who had promised $9 million and had nothing. Judge Peterson said at the final sentencing that he hoped the sentences would serve as a deterrent, that the weight of what the court had handed down would mean something to someone somewhere who might consider something like this. It is hard to know if that is true. What is true is that 4 people are in custody, that the digital trail Showmiller left behind by demanding proof destroyed every defense any of them might have constructed, that Cece Hoffman was 19 years old and wanted friends and found the wrong ones, and that Timothy Hoffman rode a motorcycle in her memory 5 years later and did not come home either. If this case was an emoji, it would be a phone screen glowing in a dark room in Indiana with a promise typed into it that was never real. If you are still awake, drop that emoji in the comments so I know how many of us made it this far. Because we are not done yet, the second case is waiting, and it is just as dark. Let us keep going. Taylor Wright was born and raised as a girl who had nothing in life. She entered the foster care system in South Carolina when she was just a small child. There is no information available to us or on record in court regarding what happened to her family or what she went through until she was 13 years old. One day, she went to the front of a house and asked a woman for help. Nancy Murchison, who saw her with wet hair, looking quite thin and disheveled, couldn't turn her away and took her into her home. Years later, on the Dateline program, Nancy Murchison said she didn't know exactly what it was about Taylor that caught her attention. She simply said, "Come, stay with us." This family was good for Taylor. She got her life back on track and spent most of her teenage years with the Murchisons and their sons. Life took her to North Carolina, where she met the man she fell in love with. Jeff Wright was a Marine, and she married him. They had a child together. Taylor then became a police officer, excelled in that role, and went on to become a private investigator. Look how far that little girl who was once nobody in the Murchison family had come. She had experienced life at a very young age. By 2017, she was facing a life-altering event. Her marriage was falling apart, There was a child in the middle and two parents who couldn't get along. Things were about to get ugly. This process looked like it would be very difficult for the family. Months of custody battles were underway, and a court date was approaching. A judge had ordered Taylor to bring $25,000 in cash to the next court hearing. He gave a large portion of the money to the closest friend he had ever trusted in his life. This trusted friend's name was Ashley MacArthur. Taylor trusted Ashley even more than he trusted himself. Their bond went back so far, and their friendship was so strong that he believed Ashley was the only person in the world he could entrust this money to. The responsibility that came with the money was immense. If the authorities found out it had been transferred, the consequences would be dire. However, Taylor's biggest mistake at this point was trusting a friend. Ashley had started spending the money the moment it hit her account, and she was spending it on such ridiculous things. She was buying expensive gifts for a boyfriend she was keeping secret from everyone. In other words, she was choosing her boyfriend over her best friend. $34,000 had been transferred from Taylor's account to Ashley's. That money was then going to Ashley's boyfriend. Taylor had no idea about any of this. She moved to Pensacola after the separation, got on a dating app, and met a woman named Cassandra Waller. They had not been together long, but Waller told investigators they had been together long enough for it to feel real. There had been some turbulence. Taylor had cheated on Waller at some point, and Waller had found out, but they were working through it. Taylor was in the process of moving in with Waller when the court date started getting close, and the money situation became urgent. The hearing was days away. Taylor needed $25,000 to bring before the judge. She went to Ashley and asked for the money back. Ashley said she would get it, gave a reason why she could not do it immediately. Taylor asked again. Ashley gave another reason. This went on for weeks. Taylor asked multiple times. Ashley kept finding excuses. On the morning of September 8, 2017, they made a plan. Ashley and Taylor would go to the bank together. Taylor would get the money. The court date was close enough that here was no more room for delays, but Ashley MacArthur had already figured out that she could not give the money back. $34,000 was gone, spent on gifts for a man Taylor did not know about, and whatever was left was not enough to cover what Ashley owed. If Taylor went to that bank and the money was not there, Ashley was finished. The friendship was finished. The legal exposure was serious, so Ashley changed the plan. She called Cassandra Waller that morning and told her that instead of going to the bank, she and Taylor were going to ride horses at a farm in East Milton. Waller said she was concerned immediately. She knew how badly Taylor needed to get to that bank. She knew what was riding on it. She started texting Taylor as soon as she hung up with Ashley. Taylor did not respond. Waller kept texting through the day. Nothing. Then at 7 in the evening, a message came back from Taylor's phone. It said, "I will call you later. I am not angry with you, and I should have called, but I just need to think. I'm trying to get my life organized and on track." Whaler read it, and something felt wrong. The message did not sound like Taylor. The phrasing was off. Taylor did not talk like that. She was direct, blunt, a former cop who had spent years working cases and reading people, and she did not send messages that sounded like someone trying to imitate a person who needed time to think. Waller reported Taylor missing. Investigators began pulling on threads. Ashley MacArthur was the last person known to have been with Taylor. She was cooperative with police, calm. Almost too calm, some investigators noted later. She answered questions without apparent distress and said she and Taylor had parted ways that afternoon, and she did not know where Taylor had gone, and then somebody pulled the security camera footage from a convenience store. On the morning of September 8th, before she and Taylor went anywhere, Ashley MacArthur had stopped and bought Taylor a beer. One beer. For Taylor specifically, and then investigators talked to 3 of Ashley MacArthur's friends. The 3 friends were the part Ashley MacArthur had not planned for. At some point before September 8th, Ashley had told people about what she intended to do to Taylor. Not one person, 3. She had described a plan to obtain an illicit substance and put it in Taylor's beer. Make it look like an accidental reaction. Taylor would drink it and pass away, and nobody would connect it back to Ashley, because Taylor's life was already complicated enough that an accidental reaction could be explained away. The divorce, the stress, the money problems, the court date bearing down on her. Ashley had talked about this out loud to 3 separate people, and none of them had gone to the police. On the morning of September 8th, the security camera at a convenience store recorded Ashley MacArthur buying a single beer. For Taylor, investigators who watched that footage later said the timing lined up precisely with what the friends had described, but Taylor spit the beer out. One of the friends testified that Ashley had told her afterward that Taylor said it tasted funny. Just spit it out and did not drink it. The substance plan was finished the moment Taylor put that beer down, so Ashley used a weapon instead. What happened at the farm in East Milton on September 8, 2017, is reconstructed from physical evidence and Ashley MacArthur's own subsequent behavior because there were no witnesses. Taylor Wright suffered a fatal impact to the head area. Her form was wrapped in a hammock. Ashley concealed her on the property and then drove home. The next morning, September 9th, Ashley MacArthur appeared on security cameras at a store purchasing concrete and potting soil. Investigators found this footage after Cassandra Waller reported Taylor missing. The timeline was already suspicious. The last known contact was a text message that did not sound like Taylor, sent from Taylor's phone at 7 in the evening after Waller had been unable to reach her all day. The last person to see Taylor was Ashley, and now here was Ashley on camera the morning after buying materials consistent with concealing the site. On September 9, 2017, investigators obtained a search warrant for the farm in East Milton. Within 2 hours, they found Taylor Wright. She was concealed on the property, wrapped in the hammock, with a fatal impact to the head area. Ashley MacArthur was arrested that night and charged with first-degree premeditated foul play. She pleaded not guilty. The prosecution had a problem, and they knew it going in. There was no DNA linking Ashley to the foul play, no forensic evidence directly connecting her to the incident. What they had was circumstantial, the concrete and potting soil on camera, the financial motive, the text message that did not sound like Taylor. The three friends who testified about the substance plan, and the fact that Ashley was the last person to see Taylor alive and had lied about where they went that day. Ashley had told Waller they were going to ride horses. East Milton is not where you go to ride horses as a casual afternoon activity. The farm was remote. It was the kind of place you go when you need privacy. The defense pointed to everything the prosecution did not have. No weapon recovered, no DNA, no direct witness. A case built on the testimony of three people who by their own admission had heard Ashley describe a plan and said nothing to anyone. The defense suggested the jury should look at what was absent from the evidence as carefully as what was present, but the jury had the security footage. Concrete and potting soil the morning after your best friend goes missing, and you are the last person to have seen her. That image sat in the courtroom and did not move prosecutors. Also presented the financial records. $34,000 moved out of the account Ashley controlled in the months after Taylor gave her the money. The purchases were documented, gifts, for the man Ashley was seeing on the side. Taylor had trusted Ashley with money she could not tell anyone else about, and Ashley had spent it. And then when Taylor needed it back, Ashley had decided that causing Taylor's passing was a more viable option than explaining where the money went. Assistant State Attorney Bridget Myers Jensen told the jury that the motive was simple. Taylor was about to find out. The court date was days away. $25,000 had to appear before a judge, and Ashley did not have it because she had spent Taylor's money on someone else. The only way to stop that from happening was to make sure Taylor never made it to court. Ashley MacArthur had been Taylor's closest friend, the person Taylor trusted with a secret she could not share with anyone else, the person she called when things were difficult. And Ashley had looked at that trust and calculated that it was cheaper to cause Taylor's passing than to return her money. Cassandra Waller sat through the trial and gave investigators everything she had from the beginning. The phone call from Ashley changing the plan, the text to Taylor that went unanswered all day, the message at 7 in the evening that did not sound like Taylor wrote it. Waller had known immediately that something was wrong. She had reported it. She had cooperated fully. The three friends who had heard Ashley describe the substance plan took the stand and told the jury what they knew. Their testimony was uncomfortable. They had heard someone describe a plan to cause the passing of a person and had not gone to the police. They had to sit in that courtroom and explain why. There was no good answer to that question, and they did not have one. The jury convicted Ashley MacArthur of first-degree foul play. She was sentenced to life in prison with a mandatory minimum of 25 years. Ashley MacArthur did not break down in court. She sat through the trial composed and cooperative the same way she had been cooperative with investigators from the beginning. She had answered questions. She had not run. She had maintained the not guilty plea through the whole process and watched prosecutors build a circumstantial case around her without the kind of direct forensic evidence that makes convictions feel inevitable. But the jury came back guilty life in prison. Mandatory minimum 25 years. Ashley MacArthur was taken into custody and transferred to Florida Department of Corrections, where she remains. The verdict did not undo what had happened to Taylor Wright. It rarely does. What it did was close a legal chapter on a case that had started with a woman going to the bank and ending up concealed in a hammock on a farm in East Milton. Taylor had been through things that most people do not survive intact. Foster care at 13. Years of building something from nothing with Nancy Murchison in her corner. A marriage to a Marine. A career as a cop and then a private investigator. A son she was fighting for in a courtroom while simultaneously trying to start something new with Cassandra Waller in Pensacola. She was 33 years old, and she was in the middle of remaking her life. For what felt like the fourth or fifth time she trusted the wrong person with the one secret she could not afford to share. That is the part of this case that does not let go. Taylor was not naive. She was a former police officer. She had spent years reading people professionally. She knew how investigations worked and what evidence looked like and how people behaved when they were lying. She had built her career on exactly that kind of judgment, and she still did not see Ashley coming. Because Ashley was not a stranger. She was not someone Taylor had met recently or trusted without reason. She was the person Taylor called. The person who knew things about Taylor that nobody else knew. The friendship was real enough that Taylor handed over $100,000 in cash and did not ask for a receipt. That is how much she trusted her. Ashley spent $34,000 of it on gifts for a man Taylor did not know existed. And when the moment came to either tell the truth or find another way out, Ashley bought a beer and put something in it, and when that did not work, she used a weapon. 3 people had heard Ashley describe the substance plan before September 8th and said nothing. That fact hung over the trial in a way the attorneys on both sides addressed carefully. The friends took the stand and testified, and in doing so acknowledged that they had sat with that information and made a choice. The jury heard them and convicted Ashley anyway. Detective work on this case was not complicated in the traditional sense. There was no DNA, no weapon recovered. What broke it open was a combination of things that Ashley had not fully accounted for. The security camera footage of her buying the beer that morning. The security camera footage of her buying concrete and potting soil the next morning. The text message from Taylor's phone at 7 in the evening that Cassandra Waller recognized immediately as wrong. And 3 friends who eventually decided that testifying was something they needed to do. Cassandra Waller made the first call. She reported Taylor missing. She gave investigators the detail about Ashley changing the plan from the bank to the horse farm. She provided the text message that did not sound like Taylor. Without Waller moving fast in those first hours, the trail might have gone cold before anyone thought to pull the farm records. Nancy Murchison, who had taken Taylor in at 13 and given Gaffer Nancy Murchison, who had her a place to land when she had nothing, heard the verdict and said what the people closest to Taylor tended to say in the aftermath, that Taylor deserved better, that she had worked so hard for everything she had, and had trusted someone who used that trust to cause her passing over money. Nancy Murchison, who had taken Taylor in at 13 and given Gaffer Nancy Murchison, who had her a place to land when she had nothing, heard the verdict, and said what the people closest to Taylor tended to say in the aftermath, that Taylor deserved better, that she had worked so hard for everything she had, and had trusted someone who used that trust to cause her passing over money. Taylor's son was 7 years old when she disappeared. He is older now, old enough that the story of what happened to his mother exists in the public record, and a way he will eventually be able to find, if he looks, the trial transcripts, the Dateline episode, the security footage of Ashley MacArthur buying concrete the morning after. It is all there. Jeff Wright, who had been fighting Taylor in court over custody and money and everything else, lost the chance to resolve any of it. Whatever they had left to say to each other across a courtroom table passed away with Taylor in East Milton. The divorce proceedings that had created the pressure that created the money problem that created the situation Ashley decided to resolve with a weapon were rendered irrelevant by the weapon Ashley MacArthur is in Florida State custody, serving a life sentence. The farm in East Milton where Taylor was concealed is just a piece of land now, and Thunderbird Falls is still open to hikers 20 miles outside Anchorage. The house on Twin Lakes Drive in Keller, Texas, still stands in the same subdivision. The cases in this series end in courtrooms, and sentences and verdicts and families trying to figure out what comes next. The details change, the names change, the methods change. What does not change is the part where someone who was trusted decided that the person trusting them was worth less than whatever they stood to gain. Taylor Wright built her whole life on the ability to read people, to notice the thing that did not fit, to catch the detail that everyone else walked past. She was good at it professionally, and she was undone by it personally, because the one blind spot almost everyone has is the person standing closest to them. She was 33 years old. She just needed to get to the bank, and you sleep well. You are safe.